Workshop. Yes, quiet please. We are now live streaming. So welcome to the councillors and staff that are here this morning, to those that are going to be watching online. This is the annual plan review, part 2. We've allowed quite a bit of time for this to get through with the team. Francois and Paul I have not heard from at the station or Janella. So at the moment they are not down as apologies. We will see where that goes. I'm waiting for them to come back to me to formalise that. But apart from that, great attendance. Thank you everybody for being here and having the time to attend. I will hand over to Barb, who will be running the workshop with her team. Yes, so I will hand over to you now, please, Barb.
Cool. So thank you everyone again for being able to be in attendance today. I know the workshops come into people's time and trying to juggle everything around, so we are appreciative. But these are a real value add for the team in for us in terms of getting ourselves ready for the annual plan process. So these workshops help provide a direction for us going forward to be able to provide the annual plan, which will go out for consultation. Unlike some councils, we will be consulting live and hopefully on the annual plan. So it's one of the key things around trying to ensure that the community is well informed of where we're going and why we're doing the things we're doing. So I get the slightly joyous task of telling you some of the upfront principles and constraints that we have, and then I'll hand over to the team, which hopefully will be able to provide more of a good news story going forward. But look, one of the things I know we've talked about this before, and one of the drivers that I've been very keen and the team have been very supportive of, is to look how we can drive rate relief across the district, and that's been a key driver for us in all of the work that we've done around the annual plan. We do realise that annual planning does have certain constraints on it, in the sense that we can't make wide scale change, and that the annual plan reflects year 2 of the long-term plan, 2025 to 2034. So we are a little constrained in what we can do in this year 2 period. However, we do have opportunity for the long-term plan, which will start, our work will start on that in April. So we will be able to start talking with you more fully about where we can really get to grips with what's going forward in the long-term plan, which obviously includes much more of the capital expenditure and the process around that. So one of the things, or the 2 principles that we've applied for us today to bring forward to you, has certainly been around driving rate relief wherever we can. We're fully aware of the fact that the year 2 long-term plan reflected a proposed rate increase of 8.61%, but we are looking to see where we can give some relief around that. We have also been very keen that principle around retaining the level and quality of services that we currently provide to the communities of Westland has been one of the drivers for our looking across our work. We have looked very closely at how we've interrogated all of the lines of council spend, but more importantly, where we've gone back and looked at the assumptions and some of the principles that were applied through the long-term plan process, which clearly are quite different to the position that we find ourselves this economic backdrop now. So we're working and we'll continue to work through that to make sure that we're aligned with those. Certainly we're aware that everybody in the community, ourselves included, would love to see a no rate increase, but the reality of that, and I think some of you folk that have been through that process where rates were artificially held at a very low to non-increase level, the consequences of those going forward, we're still reverberating through our processes today. So we're acutely aware of that. We're also aware that it's our role to act prudently and to find a balance between where we can give rate relief and where we are sure that there will be no unintended consequences for those people in the district. So that's part of the work that has been working through with the team. Stephen and the team have been working hard to go through the annual plan, through the long-term plan assumptions. They are prepared to put the presentation to you today. As we've said, it's a workshop, so it's gathering information so that when we come back with the draft consultation plan, annual plan, you will see reflected hopefully those principles and the work that's been undertaken. So that's what will go out for consultation, because obviously the workshop's not a decision-making opportunity. It's for us to have some direction, but also for discussion about where we're landing. So on that note, I'll hand over to Stephen and the team. I don't know, Stephen, if you would like to introduce the other people sitting at the table from the team for today's workshop. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Babs. Kia ora, everyone. So yeah, I mean, most of you know me already, I think. So we've got Cody, so our financial accountant. So Cody's been working very closely with me, obviously managing all of the numbers and doing all the crunching and all the forecasting in the background. So it's, you know, there are, you imagine there's quite complicated models that are behind how we build these numbers up. And obviously, you know, it's a little bit like the butterfly effect that you change a number here, but it has ripples through various different things. So it's kind of making sure that we understand that when we've changed something, it hasn't had unintended consequences. So Cody's been working very hard on that. And then we've got Megan with us today. It's our General Manager of Business Enablement. So Megan's here, quite a few of the changes that we're looking at sit within Megan's area. So if there's further information that people would like to put forward, then Megan's here to answer questions. And then we've got me with us and Sam, who obviously part of our administration team and supporting everyone here today. So basically just to follow on from what I was saying, so just to give you a brief update of where I kind of like to go with this. So just going to start off with the current position, so where we are sitting at the moment from the LTP. So a reminder, this is, and I keep saying this over and over again, probably all doing it, this is year 2 of the LTP, so we are bound by the LTP rules. We do have some room for manoeuvre, and this is what we've obviously looked at, as Bob said. We've tried to look at where we can look at things that we can maybe make changes if they're possible, or where things are no longer appropriate given where we are, where we find ourselves in the current situation. So then looking at what the material variances are to the LTP, so we can understand what's actually changed already and the changes that we've had to make. Just touching briefly on fees and charges. So again, City Council obviously looks to generate revenue through user pay. That's obviously something that we're all keen to kind of make sure that the correct people are bearing the cost of work that they're doing, and it is a bottom rate payer, so that users actually pay for the services. Just want to talk briefly about the risks of the annual plan. Like preempting the slide, obviously there's the situation going in Iran at the moment, potential inflationary risks. I'll come on to that when we get to it. And then following on from the first workshop where we did some information sharing with you, we put forward some options, which you indicated that you would like to see more information on as well. So we've gone away and we've done that. So we've now got these 7 potential options, which, as Bob said, this is a workshop, so I'm not asking you to make a decision today, but it would be asking you basically to tell us, give us feedback on what you think on it, and we can go away and do additional work if it's needed. And then we'll come back and put these into a proposal, which then will form the draft annual plan. So then looking how those changes impact on rates, and then just the next steps. So that's kind of my process for today. Again, happy for people to interrupt and ask questions as I go along if you want to. It's a workshop for you guys, so more interaction the better. So just to kick off, so the material, where we are at the moment. So this is looking at the current position versus LTP before any of the adjustments have been processed. So we are looking at, first column is proposed numbers. Year 2 is the annual plan, as in year 2 of the annual long-term plan, and then the variances to them. So I think kind of touched on this, you know, that some of the main changes that we're seeing are in increases to grant funding. This is actually just timing issues. So grants, these are grants for capital works programs that have been accelerated. So there's no cost to cancel. It's just that we've received the money sooner than we expected. We can go ahead with the work sooner than we expected. And just the way we have to account for it, you have to bring grants and subsidies into the LTP. Sorry, to beg your pardon, into the statement of comprehensive revenue expenditure. It doesn't actually make any difference to the plan. And as Barb kind of mentioned, we haven't got capital in here as a slide, and that's deliberate. It's not an omission. There have been no significant changes to the capital program. The scheme is as per the LTP year 2. The only changes are variances on timing. So whereas planned things have either moved into next financial year or moved into the financial year after. So again, there is no direct impact in terms of the capital hasn't changed. There is an impact to rates, obviously, in that, you know, if a project was loan funded, then obviously that would be, there'd be interest costs associated with that. Those interest costs will then be deferred to future years. So there is some small operational impact, but we haven't actually gone into capital program because we're actually delivering the year 2 of the LTP. So that's why you won't see that here. I mean, just to pull out the main variances, depreciation, as I've been saying in the general council meetings, obviously we identified an error with the budget for depreciation. Unfortunately, that continues all the way through the LTP. So it's something that we will pick up and adjust when we do the next LTP, but we have it again this year. It's made up of 2 items, unfortunately. So one was just an under budgeting of depreciation, so just a pure error in the way it's calculated. And then there's been some changes in the way that we value assets and how they're depreciated. We need to make some changes to that, which is unfortunately meant we need to do a catch up. Most of this doesn't impact rates because depreciation is reserve funded. So there is some impact on rates, but that has already been taken care of within these numbers, and it hasn't made any significant difference since the first time we spoke on this. But just to say that obviously I appreciate it's a large variance. These unfortunately are things that are coming to light, and it's why we're doing the work that we're doing so that we can clear through and make sure we're much cleaner going forward. I'd like to say that we've got everything. I'm confident we've got, you know, we've reviewed most of the main items now, but again, as part of the LTP process, when we do a much deeper dive than we've done, then could be more things coming to light, and we'll obviously let you know if that happens.
Yes.
Great.
And other expense,
Yes.
that seems quite a big percentage. What are some of the items that would be included in?
Yeah, so it is unfortunately, the headings aren't particularly helpful, but as you said, it basically just splits our employee costs, finance costs, depreciation, and then everything else is called other. So this is something that we're looking to change so that we can break that down. But to answer your question, actually we'll come on to it on the next slide, but it's things like repairs and maintenance. So the roading contracts are all within that number. So if you imagine the roading contract is our biggest budget. So it has repairs and maintenance. It also has the management fees, you know, the waste services for Westland are outsourced. So it's the management fee for the solid waste services. And various other, I mean, it's basically everything that isn't either employee expenses, depreciation, or finance. So it is all of the costs. So it is something we're looking to change the way we.
You said there's over 100 different categories.
Yes, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, you know, in terms of GL codes, so the category codes we have, I think we've got about 1,500 GL codes. So, you know, there's multiple lines that go behind this, and it rolls up and it rolls up and it rolls up, and eventually we end up with a very high level number. But we don't need to go towards the old 1,500 lines, but I do think we need to break that. So the next slide, I have kind of picked out the bigger numbers. The point I wanted to raise, which I know we raised previously, but just is this concept of the vested asset. So which I've broken out separately. In terms of the account, it actually sits. So where you have grants on vested assets, like 14.8 million, it actually should sit within grants and subsidies, but I've removed it. And equally, the vested asset expense of 16 million should sit within other expenses, but again, I've removed it because it's actually distorts the way the accounts look. So the vested asset, so this literally is the work that we're doing at the airport, which is 100% grant funded, so no impact on ratepayers. You know, it's all external funding that was raised. But the way it works is a vested asset is basically an asset that we will build, but we don't actually own. So the council is using the grant money that it has secured. It will then complete all of the works using the grant money as, again, no ratepayer impact, and it will then give that asset to the airport. And at that point, under accounting terminology, it becomes vested. So that's really all that means, is we're transferring the asset from our accounts into their accounts. It had no cost to us, so there's no impact. The reason I wanted to split it out, and sorry for labouring the point, but these are big numbers, is that some of the grant money has been received in this current financial year. So we've received roughly 2 million of grant funding in this financial year. That money is recognised in this year's accounts. The way the vested asset works is it can only be transferred when it's 100% complete. So we can't transfer 2 million of the grant funding work we've already done. That's basically sitting on our accounts as work in progress. So we can't transfer that over yet. So this is why we have a timing difference, which is why I wanted to pull it out. Because if we'd had 16 million of grants coming in and 16 million of expenditure, it would have netted to zero and it would look okay. But what it looks like in the accounts is that we're spending 2 million more than we're getting. It's not, we have got 16 million, it's just 2 that was recognised this year. Unfortunately, 14 will be recognised next year, but the full cost of the 16 million will be in next year's accounts. So it's a bit of accounting, I'd say nonsense for want of a better word, but it's just the way we have to follow the accounting rules of how we treat the asset. Hopefully that makes sense. And that's why I split it out, just so that we can kind of explain. Because again, to your point, Councillor Maitland, you know, that other operating expense will actually have another 16 million in it. So it's actually up in the 30s, so it looks even worse, but this is why it's not actually correct. So as Bob said, at the moment, the plan is the LTP had a rate increase of 8.6%. For the work that we've done so far, and including, actually, I realised, sorry, I've just noticed, sorry, I put that this is pre-adjustments. It's actually position, assuming all of the adjustments are adopted. So this is what it would look like. So we're actually saying that we have a reduction of 1.96% on the increase. So the increase will reduce from 8% to 6.65%. So appreciate it's still an increase in rates, but it's a reduced increase in rates of roughly 2%.
So just to go back a little bit, so that $2 million for the grants.
Yes.
Would that, if that was recorded, would that have an impact on the total operating surplus?
Yes, it would, but then so this year it will. So
Yeah.
this year's accounts, I think we're showing at the moment, we're showing 5 million operating service, and that budget was 3 million. So that's why at the moment in the current year we're showing a surplus, and then next year we'll show the 2 million deficit. So the two just cancel. It's purely a timing issue. If we'd have completed the work in the time that we got the grant, this would be an issue.
So that operating surplus would have gone up to 2.5 or something?
Yes, exactly. So that, yeah, that's why I was trying to show that line with excluded. This is what day-to-day operations of the council actually looks like, is we've got 2.5 surplus, but reality, when we come to report our accounts and our auditors' accounts will show we've actually only got $500,000 surplus. But as you said, this year we're showing 2 million surplus more than we were anticipating. So it's just sitting in reserves.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I'll move on to the next slide. Good. There we go. Okay, so actually this was to your point, Councillor Maitland, that these are the main variances that we're actually seeing so far. Again, apologies, I realise again, I said pre-adjustment, this is after the adjustments have been made. As I said, part of it was additional funding that we've received, so grant funding, so that relates to Jackson Bay, the West Coast Wilderness Trail, so they're the big movers there. It's funding that we already had secured, it's just happening earlier than we planned. And again, no impact to ratepayers because it's schemes that were funded by these amounts.
Is any of the percentages of those, what Jackson's Bay and Cycle Trail, does any money come from ratepayers for that?
There is some money on that is funded by it. So for West Coast Wilderness Trail, off the top of my head, I think about $200,000. Jackson Bay, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Apologies.
I don't think we make any contribution to Jackson Bay as a grant or anything from the council this
It's
stage.
on the long-term plan.
We've got the funding from the long-term plan in there, but there's not an ongoing rural grant different to what I think you're talking about, Councillor Whitman. So not for Jackson Bay, there's the funding breakdown is the long-term plan, what we expected to get, what will be contributed, but not the same as the rural child, which is an ongoing. And just for those folk around the table, we are looking at a small legal group internally that are looking across the Wilderness Trail to bring back the paper to you folk to give a clear indication of what the Wilderness Trail looks like, what's involved in it, what the whole background to what is the Wilderness Trail in relationship to the council, and that will be coming within the next 3 months.
So is there a contribution from council to the Jackson's Bay Port?
In the funding, I believe that when we looked at, there is equal, we've got some funding externally, and there was some, I can't remember.
That's great.
The
It
more
is
we
in the
can
long
achieve from the industry externally, this is
That's right.
what we need to put into it.
So it was a moving,
It wasn't moving.
we took a cautious approach and put us, if we didn't get any external contribution, but we're working hard to get that external contribution so that it reduces anything we have to contribute.
Okay, so then efficient amortization, I've already spoken about. These lines below then, so Councillor Main, these are the lines that form part of other expenditure. So this is, again, not all of them. I've picked out the main cost drivers. So as you can see, it's, repairs and maintenance is one of the large numbers. There is an increase at the moment. That's mainly around additional works that's required on the water assets. Again, it's tied in with the water services delivery plan, so it's not something that we can look to defer. It's work that we need to continue to carry out under the water services delivery plan. As I said, when we've looked at these adjustments, we have gone in and reviewed them, and we have tried to make changes where we can while maintaining current service levels and not making any significant adjustments to the LTP. But that's not to say we haven't just accepted the numbers. We have conducted a review with budget holders and gone through all of this and done the breakdowns to make sure that the numbers we've got are realistic and have been challenged. Again, obviously caveating that it is an LTP, so we can't make significant changes, but we have not just accepted what's in there. So,
Sorry, Steve, to interrupt. That process, working with managers and the teams, is something that we've strongly encouraged to go forward as we go through the financial year anyway, to try and make sure that we're on top of all of those things going forward in terms of projections and so forecast. And Stephen and the team have tidied up quite a bit of the stuff that was sitting in the background around there. So I know, for instance, we get quite a bit of media coverage around the size of our FTE for this council, but we're the smallest council in terms of the leanness of our staff and complement. But still, whenever there are any vacancies or anything else that comes through, SLT has to review them all. So nothing just gets as a churn. It's always. Sorry, Steve.
that's okay. Another driver of increases has been electricity and diesel. So electricity costs are rising across nationally. Obviously, seen that impact council as well. We are able to make some savings. So you're all aware that we're switching the diesel generator out, so that will be coming back up at the pool. So that's switching over to electric. Even though electric is increasing, it will still be cheaper than running the diesel generator. So we are seeing some cost offset there. We've actually then, the rest of them are all reductions we've managed to make within the budgets, as I said, maintaining with the philosophy of maintaining current service levels. So there's been some minor adjustments to IT expenditure. We're relying less on consultants and also on contractors now, as we have a stronger team internally. We've also looked at our conferences and accommodation budget. It's been traditionally underspent, so we've actually reduced that down. We won't need it, not been using it. Personnel costs, we've maintained the budget as it was and maintained FTE as it was within LTP. So we're sticking to where we are now and the headcount that we have now, the FTE headcount we have now. There is a reduction showing, and that's because of some of the proposals we're making, which we'll come on to, which I'll remember from our previous time that we met was around looking at potentially changes to service levels at some of the museum, eyesight, and library, and also the swimming pool. So these proposals are in here, and that's why we're seeing a reduction in payroll costs, because that reflects those changes, but we'll come on to those shortly. Insurance, I'd like to say that was down to strict negotiations by the council, but I can't take credit for it. This is a collective that we operate under the South Island Collective, negotiated a very good deal and managed Westland, actually, I think it was one of the few councils that actually saw a reduction in its interest and insurance cover, sorry. So that's a saving that we've been able to bank. And similarly, interest and finance costs are down at the moment. So we're looking at expecting it to be a 300k reduction. This is due to, like I mentioned before, though capital, we haven't changed the programme or our timing. And I think we mentioned last time in our workshop that obviously one of the big items is the Hokitika wastewater plant, which is now being moved into the next financial year. Originally, we were obviously planning to do much more work this year with much bigger expenditure next year, but it's still only minor expenditure in the following financial year and then the year after. So that scheme was debt funded. We no longer need to raise that debt, so we have reduced interest costs. We're also at the moment seeing lower than forecast interest rates, which again has reduced what we're expecting as per the LTP. But that's something I'd like to come on to because that's today's position, but there was lots of things going on that could impact that.
Excuse me, Stephen.
Yeah.
How much does council pay for carbon tax?
So we currently pay about $200,000. In the past, it's been at a similar level. It varies between 200 and 250,000. I know that there has been a process by which we've sometimes purchased more than we needed on the basis that we could bank it, and therefore in future years we would have to pay less. I have to say that it's easier in hindsight for me to say this, so this is not a criticism, but where that's happened, carbon credits have actually dropped, so it might be more prudent to have just waited and just purchase what was needed at the time. But that's the dollar amount is 200,000 in this coming financial year.
So does the council purchase credits to offset?
Yes. Yes, exactly, yes, because for the emissions at its landfill sites. So we currently have sufficient credits to cover what we need to the end of the financial year, but it is something we're looking at the moment, as I said, whether or not we need to top up the carbon credits. But there is budget for $200,000 within the next financial year.
Just clarifying this depreciation
Yes.
era, is that funded out of rates?
So it's a mixture. The majority of it isn't. A majority of it is unfunded depreciation or its rate reserves.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're seeing is a catch up. So there's been a process in place by which we've depreciated the assets and applied depreciation rates to it, but it's been applied to an incorrect number. So it's been applied to a number that was lower than it should have been. So if the asset was worth $100 and then would have put 10% depreciation, we should have put $10 depreciation. We've actually said that we've depreciated it on a lower number, so we've used one of our valuation numbers, which say would value it at $80. So we've only put through $8 in depreciation. All of that goes through reserves. So it's basically what we've been doing is the reserve has been building because we've been rating for depreciation, but we haven't been depreciating at the correct levels. So we have a budgeted depreciation, which is what we set rates for. Then we have the actual depreciation inputs.
But the reserves have gone up.
So the reserves exactly. So reserves have gone up, which is why now we're being hit with it. We're just drawing down our reserves.
So I guess what I'm getting to is that when we correct this,
Yes.
there will be a future reduction in the rate forecast because we already have the reserves in place.
In place that exactly, yeah. So we will draw down. Obviously, the depreciation when we redo the LTP will then all be recalculated, and then we'll have to look to see what that happens, and then it will be something will come to council and say, okay, we've got X million in reserves.
Yeah.
This is what we could do.
Yes.
Do we how low do you want to draw that reserve down? Do you want to draw it to zero, in which case we have no security, or and that's something we can have that conversation definitely. But at the moment, because as you said, reserves are running higher, we're basically used up, which is as per the LTP. Again, the LTP says that we should draw down the reserve, we're just not doing it correctly.
So there's nothing we can do because it's locked in the LTP now.
It is, but then next time. And some of this as well relates to water assets, and obviously, everything goes to plan, then the water assets will be gone come 1st of July 27. So when we do the LTP, a lot of this will go away because it will be, I'm not saying someone else's problem, but it will be handed over to the water company.
Yeah,
So it's still obviously an issue for ratepayers, but it will not be it won't form part of Westlands.
Yeah, well, it's 10% of the rates written.
Yes. Yeah.
Collected just for this
Yeah.
anomaly.
Yes. Which is why we're correcting it now, so that obviously we could have left this and said let's just deal with it in LTP, but the problem would be that much bigger. So we're kind of tackling it now to kind of try and bring it into life straight away.
Probably a stupid question.
No.
But, what is depreciation reserve?
Yes.
So that's money that's put aside to, fix things up basically.
Yes.
So is that money sort of put into interest loans?
Yeah, so we hold money in reserve. So we have what they call the term deposits. Is that the correct?
Deposits,
Yeah, so we have term deposits which we hold. So to be honest, we have 3.8 million sat on the moment on a 6-month process. Sorry, Cody looks after treasury as one of his other jobs. But we actually generate significant interest on our current account, firstly, because the interest rates are so low. So actually, just to lock anything away, we'd have to lock it away for, I think, longer than 6 months or over a year. And actually, the amount of interest we're talking about is, I mean, I appreciate it's, everything helps, but it's insignificant compared to the risk of us locking, potentially 2 or 3 million away for a year. That then if something were to happen, council can't get those funds back. So we do have some on deposit, but the majority of the money is within current accounts, which are interest bearing though.
What I was concerned about was the amount of interest we get as opposed to the rate of inflation. That would erode that quite significantly.
Yeah. So at the moment, as you say, because interest rates have been holding quite well, so which is why we've seen the swap rates doing so well. So we've actually been generating sufficient that it holds it, but it is an issue that you said. Obviously, if inflation starts rising and then the interest rates just match it, then that is something we need to look at. Again, it's a conversation we can have when we come to LTD to say these are council's reserves. We can take a prudent view, we can take a middle road, or we can take this view, and that's something that we'll definitely be looking at to come back to. Okay, move on.
I just want I've said this before, and I know you guys are looking at this, but that IT and administration expenses, that's the one that jumps out at me the most. And just efficiencies there. And I know that's probably more in operations, but
Yeah, it is.
so we're thinking outside of the box. And, I don't know if there's any more detail we could get on that, or if that's more.
It's purely operational,
Okay,
but
perfect.
it's
That's all
fine. What I will tell you is that, because I think it's important, because it is a big figure,
Yeah.
is that we are currently going through all of the information on this to make sure that we fit purpose. And
Yeah.
we're looking at all of this around licenses, investment now. So we're continuing to do that.
Yeah. Modern tools available to us.
Oh, we have all of those. It's about how they're best applied and whether we use it the right way. So all of that's the current process that we're doing.
Cool.
Because it is a big thing.
Yeah. Just the other two categories seem hard to, seem quite critical. That's the one that seems like maybe there's some capacity, but as opposed to, repairs and maintenance and depreciation, all these things that are hard to budge.
I'd have to say that the impression that I got when I looked at the budget when I first arrived was quite different to the way I look at it now.
Yeah.
When I'm aware of just how they've been applied and where they've been applied to. It is incredible, and I know people don't like hearing this, but it's the same as for the FT. It is incredibly lean. The structure just is incredibly lean. So we're just managing with what we've got. We try to make sure that we wring every dollar and
Yeah.
effort out of it, but it is really tight. That's why we don't have, and we'll talk about this before, we don't have a lot of fat there that we can suddenly go, oh, well, we can just take that off. Now, I know that's always difficult for people looking at it, so there must be something, to some degree we try and work it through, but I think the team have been really pretty interrogatory about where they look across the board.
Okay.
And I think probably this is the first time that it's been quite as transparent as it's been.
Okay, so let's moving on. So I just want to touch on fees and charges. So the inflation rates, we've been setting this is forecast to be 2.6%. This is basically, so fees have basically gone up by 2.6% across the board, unless there's been something specific that's happened within an area where we've either had to hold it because we felt that it was already approaching a point where it was beyond reasonableness, or where there's been statutory changes. So we've kind of seen that in resort consent revenue has constantly been up this year. It's been one of the items that we discussed about, because I think it always comes across as though it's a cost to us. It's actually, this is the revenue is actually higher than we're expecting. So we've actually taken that into account now, and we've actually raised the budgets for next year to say that we anticipate that will continue. So we have managed to find additional revenue there. But unfortunately, on the flip side, as you're probably aware, there's been changes to legislation regarding building consents. So particularly around the granny flats, want of a better term, that no longer need consent. So obviously we're anticipating that we'll have less work to do. There's also the fact that legislation was passed for standalone business building control associations to set up, and I believe there are 2 on the South Island, which are already starting to take work from council departments. Council obviously has the full breadth of sorry, not skills, the requirements that it has to do. So even though someone's using standalone, they have to come back to council for certain things. Obviously now they have the choice to not do the whole process with us. But we are seeing that we have a reduction in that. Whether or not that changes as time goes on and people realise that potentially it's probably easier to come to a one-stop shop, and sometimes it isn't all just about saving money, but council can walk them through the process, whereas council's coming at the end and there are issues, we then go back to the standalone and their problem to deal with. So at the moment, we're expecting a drop in revenue, but I don't know how that will play out in the market, obviously, as time goes on. But these have all been factored into the annual plan at the moment. I'd say overall fees are down because of that. We have, seen a slight inflationary increase, anticipating extra revenue on resource consents, but the building consent information wipes out all of those increases. So we are looking at a reduction of about $100,000 we anticipate. But it's hard with user fees to work out obviously volumes, what's going to happen. But that's the assumption we're working on at the moment. I just quickly wanted to touch on risk annual plan. I mean, obviously there are always risk plan in terms of, we don't know where prices are going, we don't know what's going to happen to electricity. Obviously, given what's going on at the moment in Iran, council uses multiple inflation rates when it works out what it needs to budget. So there is something called the Local Government Cost Index, which is similar to CPI, but as it indicates, it's actually done specifically for councils. So it's the councils can understand what their inflation rate is, because just the same as CPA rate for one person might not be the same as the other, depending on your lifestyle and your income. Councils are, don't necessarily follow CPI, so we have our own rate which we use. That's produced by BERL, which is the Business and Economic Research Limited. As I said, we forecast 2.6%. We're already seeing inflation pressure. Obviously, I'm sure you're all aware of what's going on and watching the news, and we're seeing it at the petrol pump already. So at the moment, we've chosen to hold our rates at 2.6% because we don't know what's going to happen with the war, whether that situation can resolve quickly, what impact that's going to have on petrol prices, and then obviously imports to New Zealand. I just wanted to flag that it is a risk plan because we have only got 2.6% inflation. If inflation starts to run much higher, obviously come onto the stage, but this goes out for consultation to the public. We then have hearings, and we're not due to adopt the plan until June. So I just want to flag that we'll keep a close eye on it, and if things have moved significantly, we might have to come back in June before we adopt and revise the numbers, or ask council what you'd like us to do, if inflation is running much higher than the 2.6 that we forecast. But it's kind of crystal ball gazing, so we've stuck with what we've got.
Stephen, so that 2.6%,
Yes.
is that the rate of inflation for council, or is it the way council sees the whole of New Zealand?
It's the rate, that 2.6 is the rate of inflation for council. So we actually use separate ones for capital. So the 2.6 is more for operational costs. So the capital expenditure, I can't remember the top of my head, but I think they're slightly higher because we're seeing more inflation within building works as well. So we use about 5 inflation rates depending on capital assets, roading assets, water assets, general inflation, and then obviously we have negotiations with our unions in terms of payroll. So then there's obviously inflation built in within union negotiations as well. So we use multiple inflation rates, but this 2.6 is the specific council rate, which all councils use as well. This bill report is used by pretty much every council in New Zealand as its way of forecasting inflation.
In saying that, council would still reflect on the ability of ratepayers to pay the inflation rate, like you say,
Yes.
personal situations, inflation affects different people.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's the principle of, because this is not LTP, that we're sticking with it, that we've said in order to maintain the levels of service and to deliver the year 2 of the LTP, these inflation amounts are amounts that we have to absorb within this plan. That's a conversation for LTP is, okay, if inflation is now at 10%, we either say, okay, we've got to put in 10% inflation, or do we look to make reductions to services or to levels of that we're providing, and we can look at it to manage it that way. So, but at the moment, we've basically taken and there was inflation built into the LTP. It is there already. So this is something that's the long-term plan has inflation built into it. Just flagging that obviously there's concerns of where the inflation rate will end up. Okay, so then moving on, So last time we did the information sharing with you in the first workshop, we come up with, I remember how, 7 potential ideas, and you obviously asked us to go away and do some more work, so we've gone away and done that work. So these numbers are already reflected within it. I've gone on the assumption, which wasn't presumptuous of me, but just so I can show the numbers, I basically said that we adopt all of these in this. This is not a decision-making process, it's just so you could actually see the impact. At the end, I've actually just got a little graph which actually breaks it all down so you can see them all next to each other, what they actually do. So the first one was around remittance of rate penalties, and sorry, I realise sometimes finance speak fits in, but just for the benefit of the doubts, the remittance is when we refund money back to someone, so should pay for everyone, but just so everyone's aware that when we remit, basically what council does at the moment is we send out a quarterly bill, as you're aware, and you'll be aware of it yourself. If you don't pay that bill in time, within 7 days, you'll receive a demand saying it's overdue, and council will charge you interest on that overdue amount. If you pay within 7 days of receiving that letter, council then remits or refunds that interest that it charges you. And we've done some work on it. It's approximately 50% of penalties at the time we send them out are then remitted. So half of all of the charges that we make to ratepayers for not paying their bills on time, we actually remove from them, and we don't actually refund it to them because they never pay it in the first place. You know, if your bill is $100 and we charge you 110, if you pay the 100, we just write the 10 out, we just say it didn't happen. So it's basically revenue that council would have generated for people not paying their bills on time, but the current policy is if you pay within 7 days, you then get that is removed, you basically don't have to pay the charge. So the proposal, and again, like I say, I don't need to make a decision, but it's just for you to think about and to debate amongst yourselves or ask questions, is that we stop doing that. That we basically say you've had 3 months to pay your bill. We will send warning letters saying your rates are overdue. We will charge you a penalty. But when we charge the penalty, we charge you the penalty, and that's it. We warned you, you didn't pay on time. You know, most, if you don't pay your telecoms on time or you don't pay your bill on time, they don't then give you the money back to pay. One item on that to note though is this is not just a monetary issue, it is also a debt recovery tool for us. And the fact that 50% of those penalties are remitted shows that it does force people to make a payment. So I just kind of want to argue both sides of it. You know, obviously one, yes, it will save us about $80,000 a year, which is about a 0.29% reduction in rates. But it could mean that rate arrears increase because people don't have that incentive to pay. You know, if you're already late with your bill and you've already been charged the interest, you might say, well, I would charge it, so what's the point of me paying it any quicker? Whereas obviously the incentive to pay will let you off in effect with the interest. Could be something that's, you know, that helps.
Stephen, so all you're talking about doing is the 7 days will stay.
Yes.
But they won't get the money
They
back.
won't get their money back. So yeah, we charge a penalty because you're late, and at the moment.
I'm just a little bit concerned because, you know, we're already in a cost of living crisis and things are potentially going to get a hell of a lot tougher out there. Not everybody gets their pay weekly, some are fortnightly, some are monthly. And I know in general, we talk about people having their own home budgets to manage this.
Yes.
Costs are going to go up across the board, not just petrol, it's going to be food and everything else.
Yes.
We're seeing that. I'm just wondering whether it would be better to do a 10-day chance to pay or a 14-day. And again, no penalty rebate once you pay, but there's a little bit wider scope to pay, and then this stays in force as well. We can't afford to be soft on people who have to pay because the consequences are too extreme for them should they not. But I just think up front we could probably revisit that time frame. That's my sentiment.
Yeah.
I just think the environment we're in, I just think we need to be really respectful of that.
Could be another way, like, sorry, Barb, did you?
Sorry,
Oh.
if you had
Yeah,
said, from
go ahead.
Through the chair, just consequently to what the mayor said, how many people pay annually up front?
I don't have the numbers off my head, but I can look at it.
What I'm looking to benefit the council is that if people want to pay in full, they get some kind of discount.
Yes.
So that we can sit on the money and gain interest on it for the whole
So
year.
that we do that currently. I need to, do you know, discount. We do at the moment, if you pay it annually upfront, you do get a discounted amount. I think it is 10%, yeah.
So, on the statement.
Yeah, if we push that a bit
Yeah.
more, maybe.
We can go in and say, these are the options
Yeah.
and what sits with them, which we don't historically do, sorry, that's.
I think if we put that out in a way that people could understand what the
Yes.
implications were, it would be easier for them to make a decision about whether or not. So I think that's really, sorry, Charles, if you would next.
I was thinking, I agree with Helen, like, we don't want to necessarily, people are struggling, we have to acknowledge that. I don't think people that pay late should be subsidized by other rate payers. But I do wonder if the system, if we is set up to the point where we don't increase the work involved, maybe a pre-letter saying, hey, reminder, your invoices, your rates are due in 1 week or 10 days. If you don't pay,
Yep.
you're going to get this penalty, and then you might still get those 50% of people paying. If it could be, if it's automated, I don't know how your system's working right
Yeah,
now, but.
so I must admit that was my thinking of it, is if we went down this, is we would, instead of sending a penalty saying we've charged you, but we'll remit it, we'll send you a letter saying we are going to charge you, but then we don't remit it.
Yeah.
Because we give you a warning. The bit that we need to look at is obviously not, and again, so I don't know the percentage, but most people receive their bill via post. And I know it's not huge money, but there's a cost to council of printing and posting and.
It's the most people, is there?
Yes,
Is there any,
majority
is there any way to incentivize getting it digitally? Maybe some
People always have. you have the
savings in their
option.
rates or?
You have the option to do that.
Yeah.
If they choose to have it posted. And just, it might be worth just thinking, Stephen, in terms of, people do have 3 months in which to pay
Yeah.
the rates. This is penalty component we're talking
Yeah.
about. So whether it's 7 days or 14 days or 21 days, there is a 3-month window. So
My
maybe
thinking
Already
is-
had 3 months.
My thinking is people, I bet you vast majority of these people, not just, some of them can't afford to pay, but some of them just forget. So that that reminder saying, hey, you got 7 days, but if it's to get it up, we have to do the math on it, I think, because if,
We used to have something in the paper saying that.
yeah.
We used to do it in the paper, just as a reminder.
But there's no reason why we couldn't look at those opportunities to do it anyway, because I think it's a good option. I think people get busy and they
Yeah.
don't always.
I forget sometimes, I go, oh, shoot, I've got a week to pay the bill.
So Stephen, are we the only council on the coast currently that does this?
Majority, yeah, and this is kind of one of the things that came out, so our rates officer was attending conferences and was talking about this, and everyone else seemed quite surprised that we do this.
On the coast,
On the need to double check.
I'm pretty sure that region does,
Yeah.
it doesn't do remittance. But it's probably something we need to do. I'm just conscious of the fact that we don't want to always be the outlier either, so it's about balancing some of that, so. But I think those are good points. If we looked at perhaps what, if we extended that window from the 7 days to maybe 14 or 21, what that would look like on the time scale. And if we looked at what it would cost us, if we looked at alternative, knowing that most of it is postal, is the cost of not so much producing, because it is automated, but you still have to put them into the envelope, you still have to post them to pay. But let's have a look at what that is. It might not be significant. And I think, Stephen, there's a few points there about just checking if people do put an annual payment in, that we could incentivize a bit more than the 10% based on what maybe the interest is looking like, so that we know that we get that back. That's probably worth bringing forward.
Good ideas.
And I think once we settle on something, it'd be really good to go out and say, respecting the climate that we're in and the stresses on people, we're looking at changing how we do this to make life a little bit easier. It's a good score for us.
The consultation process will
Yes.
mean that when we take this out, my expectation is that people are fully informed of all of
Yep.
those avenues, so they can make a call about whether that's acceptable to them as well. So this is all useful to think of, these are the questions someone on the street might be asking, well, why can't they do it longer, or why don't they send us a prompt or whatever? Let's make sure that's in the consultation document, so everybody's fully aware. Greg, did you want to say, Eugene?
Yeah, I just sometimes wonder, no reflection on Riley here. So, sometimes with snail mail, some letters can take 2 to 3 weeks to get
Yeah.
to the place that they're going. And I was just wondering if a letter was going to be sent out 7 days before, it probably needs to be sent out days.
So maybe we think about what the bishops in that would be, and so we can
True.
step ourselves through. So when the consultation process happens, and someone says to us, well, I might not get my letter, you know, and I've missed it, how do I get it? Let's try and do the questions before they're asked, and then that helps people understand more.
Yeah.
I mean, people aren't necessarily going to like it, nobody does, right? But it's, at least we understand.
And actually Greg's point is quite valid, because how many times do you hear that somebody's received a letter saying that they're, due by this time, and then they look at the days it was sent, and those 2 or 3 weeks are gone,
Yes.
so we do need to be mindful of that. It's quite irregular.
Can I add one more idea into the mix or brainstorming? What about making people pay for getting their rates in the mail? It's a small charge, it could be $5 a year or to cover those costs. And then there's an incentive to go to digital rates bill.
No, because some people can't go digital.
No, that's
You've got to
right.
remember where we are, that some people do not have the ability to use it.
Yeah.
Connectivity is a big thing in this stuff,
Mm.
particularly self-business.
Yeah.
You can't penalise people.
I think
Sorry, a good idea, but you can't.
all
penalise.
your other, well, you can actually, but your telecom and everyone else charge you power bills, you pay now $2.50 fee to get a hard copy.
Yeah, I don't think we should completely wipe that idea out, but I
I think
Yeah.
they're all
To
worth,
cover the
I
cost
think they're
somehow.
all worth looking at.
it's just an idea, yeah.
Yes, it's on the list. If you get in the bank, if you get a paper copy of your statement.
I know
they
you
will
went to
charge
banks,
you.
yeah.
Everyone.
Would it be, sorry, Carol, you go.
You know,
Also the promotion and communication about the ways of paying, so you're not, their ratepayers aren't waiting 3 months before
yeah,
they pay you. You need to facilitate the process that payment be made regularly,
Yes,
syncing in with the pay cycle.
yes.
and we do, there are quite a number of people that do staggered payments, so that helps people budget to go through, but it's still a lot of money for people to find out of there. So the more we can help them, you don't have to come in, you can do it electronically, you can do it part payment per fortnight, whatever. That information I think is really important for people to know. You know,
Through the chair. Given that it's usually about $1 to send an envelope nowadays, isn't it? So it'd be about, yeah, so a minimum 40 grand a year to send out 4 statements. And we've got some stakeholders in the community that have a social obligation to the people that live around them, which is the supermarkets and likes of Russia's, the cafe and Harry and Staghead in Fatro and Foursquare in France. It would only cost us $500 to have a pull-up banner that they can wheel out 7 days before the rates are due and pull it up, put it at the doorway. And so it's a visual reminder, because most people go into these places either to pick up their mail, your gas station, there's a mail thing there. But they all use these facilities daily.
I think it's a really good idea to consider what that would look like and how that would be received. I think the more prompts we can put people, the better. And acknowledging that we're not going to capture everybody, but we can do more about making sure that people see it in front of us. It's that thing when you, as you say, you just forget about it and then it's in front of you. And put it away. Okay.
I think we just got to bear in mind too, that it's our responsibility to correct the rates and promote that they're due, not other businesses.
I think it's just having a look at what would be good practice in terms of how we could do that, even at something like libraries or, you know, places like that are public places that you would normally put on a notice board perhaps, that people don't find that too objectionable. Let's put that into the
Yeah,
mix.
it's kind of
The
mixed.
more I'm exploiting your minds, the better, and we can see what we can do with that, that would be good. Stephen, sorry.
So I just try and put this into perspective. There's about 6,700 rating units.
Yeah, about
So-
6,500 roughly.
I'm guessing that there's roughly between 300 and 400 people would end up paying that penalty. About 5% of the rate base gets penalised. 95% complies.
Yes. Yeah.
So I just want to put that into the mix
Yeah.
when we go down this path of
Yes.
how big a problem really is.
That's a really good
So
figure, actually, isn't
I
it?
don't want to be cannibalising our rates revenue unnecessarily. The 95% who comply.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I think that's why this proposal came forward in that where these. I appreciate it's for different reasons, and you can't, demonize someone for not paying their rates on time because it could be just a reason, but at this point it is 3 months overdue. As you said, 95% roughly of ratepayers are paid on time, and it's not, you don't want the ratepayers to pay on time to subsidise those who haven't, and those who have a genuine need, if they contact council, we have 3 months to contact council, we do agree payment plans, instalments, we do, there's rate relief obviously through central government that we do workshops with to try and let them, so this said it is the minority, and okay, some of those will need assistance, and we do give that where we can.
Yeah, my gut feel is it's probably not a part that we really need to chase. It could be that the status quo is fine for the minimal variance in rate.
Yeah.
I guess it always comes down to the same thing as it's like, it's a rats and mice at the moment. But this annual plan process, that's all we've got really to look at. But I do think there are some things, some of the ideas that have come up may not be what we want to do as a concerted effort, but should be part of our normal communication update prompt anyway. And maybe we fit some of those into those rather than a campaign. It's just what we should be doing anyway. So we'll have a look at that. Okay, Stephen, is the right can tell? You got one more, and then we'll go to the next one.
Just one more question. If there's roughly 6,700 available units, I'd like to know how many actual ratepayers there are, because a lot of those, of the 6,700 people would be multiple property owners. And the reason I ask this question is I want to get a rough idea of how many actual individual ratepayers are basically covering the cost of tourism on the West Coast.
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting thing to be able to work go through. So this one, but we could look at. Do you want to move on to the next one, Stephen?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, Stephen, sorry, I'm assuming that while we're having this conversation,
Yeah.
at the end, we'll wrap up to see where we need to put more emphasis or where people feel that that's just not a direction we're following up on, because we've only got a limited time to draft done and stuff, so that's fine, but as long as we know that that's at the end of this time.
Yes. So the next one is, so I know kind of contradicting slightly because we said that, the methodology we've used is that we've maintained levels of service, but we did obviously look at some where we can make tweaks to levels of service. So again, this is repeating myself again, this is something we could look at deeper if that's what council wants to do, and that's what public want when we come to LTP, but at the moment, these are just tweaks that we think we could make within constraints of what we're already doing.
So Stephen, and just to clarify, look, the LTP process was very blunt for that last process. So there wasn't a really good refined seasonal look at some of where the costs lie. And what's happened here is through this annual plan process, you do have an opportunity to look at seasonal variation and be a little bit smarter about how you apply it. So it's rather than reducing levels of service, it's just reflecting the fact that actually there's a nuance here about where we put service in terms of seasonal.
So the next one I'll talk very quickly because it is 6.5. Okay, we're talking about, this is started with one of the small ones, it is a very small reduction. It's basically, we have several clubs that operate outside the hours of the pool, the pool then stays open to those clubs. The proposal is we just say everyone has to operate within the set hours of the pool and we will not stay open for those additional. So it's basically around swim club and swim school and some aqua classes. So it's at the moment, the pool for example, on a Sunday will close at, apologies, I'm reading myself. See, Lee's unfortunately away at the moment, so we would have spoken to this, but the pool will close at 5 PM on a Sunday, but it will stay open until 7. And then for various activities, so swim club, for example, but then the swim club finishes at 7. Then by the time they've all left, then the staff are there until 7:30 because they've got to obviously clean down and shut down the pool. So it's just, there's kind of this drift is happening. And actually what my point was that the saving will be more 6.5K because the budget is to the budgeted hours. We then end up paying additional overtime where if we have to ask the staff to stay about 45 minutes because again, not having a go at the clubs, but they just people take time, they're getting changed. And so it's it could be a higher saving that, but it's really just about saying we will move the clubs so that clubs operate within the hours of the swimming pool.
I get the Sunday one, because I mean, Sunday is, you know, that could be any time of the day really, but the swim school, I know it allows time for the kids to get from school to the pool. So, you know, if we're going to change that or cut that short, we're doing a disservice to kids learning the skill of swimming. And aqua class is again done after work, so yeah, I think we'd probably run the risk of aqua class actually not being able to fill its boats and maybe stopping. And swim class would worry me because it's important kids learn. We've got to look at the value of what the kids learn versus cost to us.
But they also
They
get,
can't come earlier.
but they also get opportunities through the school day. It's not the only opportunity.
No, it's not the only one, but this focus is purely on
Why don't you
developing their swimming.
This is like
split
a
the
private
difference and
thing, you know.
open it later, and then you can close later?
And when we put this out for consultation, we're gonna know pretty quickly whether people are happy with it or not. And so this isn't, you know, while we're asking you to consider it and come up with some ideas, you know, the consultation is there.
Yes, we-
Yeah.
Sorry,
Well,
we'll just keep it to one conversation around the table, so you and then Joseph.
Sorry.
Oh, it's Brian.
I think Ewan's comment was right. I think there's bits of work to be done around actually opening later on some of these days when the pool
Yeah.
has something happening later in the day, or opening earlier when there's, you know, exercise earlier in the morning or whatever it is. And having those days, the same length, but starting earlier or finishing earlier.
Yeah.
I think that makes a bit more sense than stretching the days out at both ends.
And you're accommodating everybody out there.
Yeah, it's just, the kids gotta learn how to swim, because there's a lot of water here, and if it saves a life, it's money well spent. They gotta learn to swim.
Yeah, really keen to.
Oh,
And then,
I just wonder if it is a small reduction, a bit of reduction is important, but maybe there's a way to cover that through a small increase in entry fees or making the clubs contribute to that extra cost. There might be a way the ratepayers aren't paying for it, but they still get the facility for the times that are needed.
Yeah, so I do know that said unfortunately he's away this week, or today, that is something that he's looking at, the contracts to get, so this user, they should say the user pay, that if a swimming club wants to stay open later, that it will cover the cost of staying open later, so that it isn't an impact on ratepayers. So I do know that's something that Lee's looking at. I think his thinking was again that to look at that as part of an LTP, that kind of looking at it, or we go out and we speak to the clubs now and say, these are the changes we need to propose. So it is something I know he's looked at.
Do we know what's the, sorry, we agree to
Right, right, sorry, yeah, I just wonder how many people actually use the service and the percentage of the local district, like, yeah, because I'm just trying to evaluate the cost of the service, that percentage of people that use it.
They
Just
do
to get a
have
rough
the-
idea.
They do have the metrics on some of that,
Yeah.
and that's what you expect to see in the consultation process going forward.
Okay.
And I think it's good if we can flesh out some of these suggestions too about rationalisation before we go.
Yep.
So that we can actually say, look, we have some options here. We could do it, you know, one of
Yeah.
these ways and then flesh that out. So, but I think the general tenure is that we're looking to see where we can rationalise things out to be more economically viable. Because we don't want things like the swim club and opportunities for kids to learn to be curtailed.
Yes.
What we need to do is try and work out how we do it more efficiently and effectively. And the consultation will help pull some of that out as well, because people will come up with their own uses, so hopefully it's that.
Well, I was just going to say that we know we've got the metrics on the foot traffic from between 9 and 10, so we can work out that pretty quickly. Because I think it's a really sound idea, just opening later, closing later. It's an easy way of managing that without not expanding the restrictions that we're talking about here. I don't know, it's you guys to work out.
Or even another option for the winter period to actually close on a Monday.
Yeah.
I think even
And I think that
was
was,
serious
I
about
don't think
reducing costs, closing one day a week or something like that. And it would give those staff a chance to actually have a day off.
so maybe when we come back with the consultation document, we do maybe a hard line, which, you know, the Monday would be at that end of the continuum. And then we've done some more exploratory work about what can be done to do efficiency and see whether we land that when the document goes out for consultation. So we get another cut at it. It's just, if anyone's got an allergic reaction that they just go, absolutely not. It would be good to hear it now, but otherwise, I think what I'm hearing is people are happy to consider it, but it needs to have some consideration about we want to maintain people being able to learn to swim. We want things to be done within the bounds of what we're doing, but perhaps more efficient. So I think that's good if we can treat that through for the next opportunity and we can ask the team to come up with that and maybe get some metrics too, so that goes into the mix. Yeah.
And we're all actually very aligned on that thought process, aren't we, with as far as.
And
There's
through
no
the
point in
last
having a
LGP.
tool that people can't use.
No,
That's
right.
right. Yeah. And I mean, because I think take Brian's point, the coast is surrounded by water where you go, you don't have to go and look for it. So the more we can do for safety, like one life is any life,
Yeah.
so.
And these, like, you just think about people's, I know it's probably a small percentage who use it, but people do use it, like, that early morning. A lot of people like to swim before work,
Yes.
you know, like Helen's point, it's for the kids in the swim school and after work classes, like. So it's hard to adjust that, but if we can figure out a way where the user, just a user pays slightly more to cover it, then I think we don't have to change people's habits. They might have to pay a touch more, but
And I think that's
Shouldn't be too
that's
drastic.
the balance, right? We've just got to work out what that looks like and then let people make a decision about where they're best placed. You're not going to get big changes in this annual plan process, definitely is. Where we need to make big calls around, we need to start looking at total change, which is a long-term plan. That's
And one other thing I will point out to everybody is that the pool is an integral part of our elderly's lives. It's their ability, they're restricted with mobility. It's one place they've got freedom. And the uptake and use of the elderly is actually really surprising. It's right up there.
good. Okay, good conversation. People feel that's sufficient on that one? Okay, moving on to the next one.
Okay, so the next few slides are all similar, so looking at hours, operating hours, so this is looking at the museum. So at the moment, summer hours and winter hours are the same for the museum, so it opens 10 AM till 4 PM all week, so I've split it because the proposal is to change that. So the proposal is that during summer hours that Saturday and Sunday it closes an hour earlier, so it's open 10 till 3. And then in winter, we'll do 10 till 3 on a Saturday, but close on Sundays and Mondays. So again, this has been looked at with Megan and her team of the museum, looking at footfall and use throughout the year and when the peak times are. And again, delivering roughly about 50K saving, which is a mixture of, obviously the thing to always remember, and sorry for stating the obvious, that the main saving is around obviously payroll, whether the museum's open or not, the rent doesn't change, and obviously it's electricity use, okay, might be slightly less, but it's, and similarly for the pool, if the pool is shut, we still have to heat the pool. So if these savings are predominantly around payroll, we have taken into account some savings to various wear and tear on the building and electric and other smaller things, but it's predominantly payroll we're talking about, it's just less staffing is needed.
And remembering that there's a high proportion of volunteers that support the museum as well, so, it's not quite as straightforward as some of the other areas, but just quite.
Chair, just a question for Megan. Is it actually less people go on public holidays to the museum? I would have thought when there's less stuff to do, more people would go.
So, I mean, obviously they've only been operating just under a year since I've come back into the building. So, what I have been provided with, so that's shutting an hour earlier, but I understand there's still buses that are coming into the town and tourists between 1 and 2, so it's still quite busy.
Oh,
In the next couple of slides, you'll see the closing of our other areas is 2 o'clock, but the discussion was an extra hour at the museum to allow that footfall to still come through the museum at that time. I mean, again, what if we really go to get into the data a little bit more, it might be enough to say, actually, these numbers versus the other areas, actually, let's pull it back again to 2 o'clock. But I think what I've been provided with to date in this first snapshot of what we are looking at is 3 o'clock, but we can definitely look at options to go back. So,
Or,
Sorry,
yes,
follow-up
so-
question to that, do we pay more on public holidays to staff
Yes, we do.
and at weekends?
Yep, we do.
Just on public holiday, not we.
On public holidays.
Public
we do.
holidays we do, yeah, but not,
I don't think we paid, no, because of the shifts. I don't think we do.
yeah, so
I
some
think
of
we
those,
do.
yeah.
And bear in mind too, some of that staff's volunteer.
Well, that, yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah,
yes.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a volunteer with a full, with
Yeah,
an
yes,
employee
yes,
on the
yes,
premises,
yes.
yeah.
But the volunteers for us is
Yeah.
significant.
Yeah.
Joseph?
I've got a couple of thoughts. I think we're on the right track here. I would say close Monday, Tuesday, because in the winter time you might get Cantabrians come over for Saturday, Sunday, and you might get some revenue there. I don't understand why you close a Sunday over, say, a Tuesday. I just more people around on Sunday. And then I think as far as tracking it, like maybe just this is again, it's completely operational out of my. But maybe that whoever's working could just have a little tally of hours, and every time someone comes through, they just put a little tick, so then you can see really where people are coming in. And if that 2 to 3 p.m. only has half a dozen ticks next to it every day, then
Can they delete all the?
Yeah.
I assume they've got
They
that.
do. There is a foot flow
There is, okay, cool.
allocator, yeah,
Oh,
so,
cool. even better.
yeah, and I think, you know, part of that wider consultation, it will be really good to understand, you know, if it's not Sunday, Monday, and the proposal of Monday, Tuesday, just having a bit more.
And that Monday will cover a lot of the public holidays
Yeah.
anyway. You could possibly close Monday year round. I don't
And
know.
this is a winter hours, yes, so
Yeah.
it's different, right? So the winter hours being on town makes a difference. Stephen?
So if volunteers wanted to take over those reduced hours, that's not excluded from this.
You'd still have to have staffing available, Stephen, you couldn't just have
You can't be
volunteers there.
run 100%.
You would have, we could look at it,
Yeah,
but it would still need to have a staff member on site. You
Yeah.
couldn't just have volunteers
Yeah.
doing it like that, not in its, not the current.
yeah, so I think as Barb said, in the current format, the requirement would be, that's what we have to do, but that's not to say there aren't opportunities for discussion to look outside of that. And, Barb and I are trying to tee up a time with,
But is that
Tom.
purely because we own the asset?
Or it's the council responsibility.
Because obviously the
Insurance would have
the long-term plan, we're still considering as the future of New Zealand. So if it ends up in some sort of other trust entity, they can make their own decisions about it.
And I think that was one of the discussion, but I think that's gone, come and gone, hasn't it, through long-term plans, as far as I'm aware, it was sort of a point last time, about whether or not it goes out into a more of a trust run outside of the council remit. And of course, that can be something for you folk to consider when the long-term plan comes up again. We still had the conversation with Paul about how, we can manage in terms of looking at the board, et cetera, but I'm not sure that encompasses that part.
If I can just follow on to what Barb said, that's part of from previous council discussion, setting up the trust and being more involved with that, with breaching going forward. So that, the long-term plan, that's looking at the whole structure of the museum going forward. And the management of that, so. Yeah, it's to come.
Did I? Anything else on that one, or do you want to move to the next one? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. I think we've applied the same principles across all of these ones, so we're just. The last. This one for library, Stephen?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, it's currently closed on Sundays, just to reduce the hours from 10 till 4 to 10 to 2 on a Saturday, and to reduce 30 minutes of the closing times Monday to Friday, so from 9 to 9:30 till 5 rather than 5:30. Which again, delivering about 39k of cost reductions.
Through the chair.
Ewan?
The only problem is people at work can't get to the thing in time. This is the annoying thing if you
Well,
work.
Saturday.
Yeah, but then if you've got kids doing stuff and, you know, there's a lot of distractions on employees, active people, I guess, but.
It is-
I assume these figures are based on their they know that it's not busy after 5, between 5 and 5:30.
Absolutely, yeah, there's figures that indicate, a very low percentage, however, like, Ewan said, you know, there is a portion of our community that can't get there in, you know, 9:30 to 5 p.m. Regular hours, but we do have Saturday, we do have digital service and things too, so, but I think that's part of the consultation when we go out wider to really understand what that is.
And I guess it's, you know, how we, it's behavioural change, right? It's how you promote it, how you work out where the officials are, and then you take this out, not trying to reduce it, just trying to be more efficient about what we know hasn't been a fully loaded area. And there's a cost involved and people are paying for it. So it's a bit of, you know, give and take, but the consultation will teach them that. Greg, you have something to say?
Yeah, 2 points. One, when I go to the library, quite a large percentage of the people there, there's people there to use the internet, travellers. And the other thing is, I'd actually like to see the Saturday proposal be closed at 1 p.m. because I don't know about other people, but if I was working there and it was a Saturday and I'd like to go fishing, I'd much prefer to knock off work at 1 p.m. than 2 p.m. because that 2 p.m. just eats into the afternoon just too much. I would have thought. So yeah, it's the only change I'd like to see.
Maybe we put some variation on the hours on the consultation, just think,
Just get a non-fisherman.
Yeah, no.
I think there's scope to be more aggressive on the hours and making more savings to the ratepayers, but I am conscious of you need to employ good staff, and if you reduce their hours too much, they might not want to work there anymore. So you've got to find that balance, and then, yeah, using digital tools and stuff so that people can still, you work Monday to Friday night until 5, you can still get a book out somehow on your lunch break or on a Saturday, and efficient, yeah, but I think there's, yeah, I mean, I see how many shops open 4 hours a day. It's just like there is, sometimes if you build it, they will come. So if the hours were limited, you are going to get them to come in those hours. As long as you can staff it. I don't want to be.
everyone knows when the sandwiches are out.
Yeah, I mean,
You've got to be
sometimes
honest when the sandwiches are out.
we're getting, cost of living crisis is crunches here. We need to make some savings. And these are areas where you might just have to make some sacrifices and people might have a 4 or 5 hour window to get their books, but you've got to be able to staff it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's been this way for a long time, so the community gets used to things being this way because that's how we've always done it. So, I mean, currently the staff are working, you know, 2 weekends out of the month, you know, like you say, their weekends are kind of gone on a Saturday if they're not leaving till 2 o'clock. And, you know, the footfall does indicate in winter sports months, you know, a lot of kids and families are kind of using the library as a bit of a holding pen before they go to sports or, you know, coming from sports. And yeah, so I think, look, again, this is just a proposal. All these variations are definitely things we'll most definitely look at and moving forward as options. Because I think they're all really valuable.
Through the chair, when's the lease up for a new?
Not for some time.
Like over 3 years?
2 years.
Two years.
I know talking on Saturday morning, sort of loitering outside the library doesn't sound right, but you know, just being there to talk. Saturday morning is a really popular time with mums and families for their kids because they have time to be at the library then with their kids engaging in what books they're reading, etc. And otherwise it's a rush trip for them. And yeah, Saturday is really precious for them with their ability to get in with the kids, have quality time which kids are actually getting the books they're wanting to read. They said sort of feedback is that during the week it's not the time it's rushed, so they actually enjoy the Saturday morning.
Saturday's not closing.
No, it's not, but it's regarded as being of value to the people that use it with their families.
We do have a community librarian in there, and part of that role is getting out and engaging with our schools. So, you know, understanding that a little better might be good too, to bring back to you guys. And I also, they do a lot of community hui in there. So they do Te Reo courses, they do mums and bubs. They actually do a lot of things outside of just books. So probably be good to bring that back in further conversations too.
And just on the back of that too, Megan, is that feedback from the community is just absolutely fantastic towards the staff in there. The amount of compliments that goes to staff and their attitude and their engagement, it's just gone up to the next level. It's just kudos to the staff and they're exceptionally good.
You do have a very high level of sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's-
and that's, you don't want to
that's extraordinary.
lose those professional
Yeah,
people
that's
if you
right.
reduce the hours too much.
There's a value add, but
Yeah.
there's also that balance, which I think you made a
Yeah.
good point. It's like trying to keep good staff, balancing what we can do for the community, but also knowing that everybody's contributing to that, which is part of the deal.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any more comment on that? Otherwise, we'll just move forward into the next one. You do.
Megan, do the library utilise volunteers as well? Like
Yes,
the
they
museum?
do,
Yeah.
yes, so they have a volunteer base, that mostly do the restocking and shelving of stock on the shelf. Yeah,
But do
It's
you-
not as high as the museum,
No.
volunteers, so
no,
it's not as high as that. But there are some that contribute.
No, that's
People
good, I
really
just-
enjoy it. Ewan?
yeah.
Through the chair, question for Stephen. We talked last time about reducing reserves on the library.
Yeah,
Has that been taken into account?
No, so we can run another
Yeah,
exercise.
Hold on to that thought, Ewan, hold on to that thought. All right, in that case, let us move on to the next one.
So this is the last hour one. Appreciate we're talking about hours a lot. So again, similar situation at the eyesight. So I think Megan's obviously looked at the team and said, tried to first align it, not just for the sake of aligning it, but aligning it so that it makes sense to what purposes are open when they're needed. So again, this is proposing that the eyesight moves onto winter hours during the winter and doesn't open on Sunday. And then again, it's the same reduction on a Saturday, that it's open from 10 till 2 rather than 10 till 4. I think that one's just a winter reduction on that one. During the summer, see there are people coming through. And again, 30 minutes on a weekday.
And just noting too, that the FA currently isn't open on Saturday or Sunday, so. You know, that also is a sort of a co-independence thing there that happens between us.
Well, we do know the stats on visitation into the eyesight is absolutely, it drops off because their record is excellent. It's moving people in that.
Drops off. In the winter, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that too.
Yeah.
Oh, we track it.
Yeah, it's been tracked really, really well to give us that option.
But the same thought before, I think we could be more aggressive on the hours here, and I think Sunday, maybe it's a Monday, it's closed, just if you're getting those Cantabrians coming over for the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, but maybe they don't use the eyesight as much as the internationals, so maybe.
No.
But I think we can be a lot more aggressive on the summer and winter hours.
I think we need to be very careful about this closing everything on a Monday. Nearly every restaurant in town is closed on a Monday.
Yeah, that's
The whole
good.
town, you could arrive in a town that's completely shut on a
And you
Monday,
get very bad reputation very quickly.
which is a bit dangerous.
Yeah, that's.
I don't think that many places are closed on a Monday. I think like 2 of the restaurants are closed on a Monday. Who's closed on Monday? Thai, what else?
Dolces.
But there's like 19 restaurants in town, like 2 or 3 of them are closed.
The
Oh,
Chinese
perhaps-
or the Indian
perhaps
one.
that's
Yeah,
something-
so you might put it in.
Perhaps
No, I
that's
don't
something
think
we
it's
can
that big of a
consider.
deal. I think weekends for domestic tourists are probably, everyone agrees Saturday, Sunday are gonna be busier than a Monday for a domestic tourist. You would think Nelson or Canterbury.
Let's have a look at the metrics.
Yes.
Yeah, the metrics will tell the picture, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll tell us. where
Because
to
it
go.
may be with the crisis that's going on at the internationals, is who we're going to see in winter time as opposed to
It's got to be, well, we'll be lucky to get internationals. It's going to have an impact that we can't yet fathom. in
I know,
terms of
I
what
know.
that's going to look like. So, I do take, Stephen's point, we've done this and not in isolation, but as a watching brief
Yeah.
on the external stuff. And it may, as we get closer to that final adoption, things will become abundantly clearer about where we're going. But at this point, we're taking it what best knowledge that we've got and we get through. So I think it's, the message I'm getting from these is go back, have a look at the metrics, it's not an allergic reaction I can see, but let's try and do some testing about what does suit folk and hoping that we get, good consultation numbers this year in terms of this one. So that we actually will be using you folk to be going out and encouraging people to feedback and put it too. So all good.
So let's
Yeah.
clarify that, just in terms of saying, going back, so these proposals that have been based on the metrics, so that's what Megan's team and I have looked at, is these are the hours that we think, looking at this, so we can share more information with you, but we have, it's not that we've looked at the metrics and come up with these, it's not that we haven't looked at the metrics and then said, oh, let's just, so this is what the metric is showing, but we can share that information with you so that you.
I think it's really useful when we do the consultation, when we do this, that you can see what the metrics are, so you can quantify them in your own head about what the numbers we talk about, and if you're doing the consultation, people will want to know what we're talking about in terms of those numbers, so we can pick them when we do the consultation. Okay.
Two more to go.
Slide.
Yes, okay, so this is, what I'm talking about. So, oh, sorry, just skipping ahead. So the library, so we operate a ring fenced reserve for the library, and we have multiple ring fenced reserves. And again, this is something of LTP that we'd obviously like to go and look at every single one of them, understand what they're doing, what we're holding, and what we're using it for, because these are council controlled. So this is a previous council has set these rules up. So they may still be relevant, or they may now need updating, but council has the ability to change them. But at the moment, we operate a ring fenced reserve for the library. It covers both capital works and book renewals. The reserve currently sits at $458,000, or we forecast it will at the end of the financial year. Depreciation that goes into it, which is funded, so this is ratepayers' money, is $86,000, which basically keeps topping the reserve up. So obviously the idea is the reserve payment to the reserve when we draw down it, and hopefully the two should more or less match. The fact that we've now got 458,000 in the reserve is obviously showing that we're not drawing it down, and it's basically building up to a point where it doesn't feel necessary to sit that high. At the moment, the maximum forecast for next year is $60,000. So, given that we have 458, the proposal is that we don't actually fund any depreciation. So that's just to say the depreciation still happens, so the charge still happens, the asset still erodes, but we don't put money aside for it because we say we've already put money aside for it. So sorry if I'm labouring the point on this, but it's something that is constantly, depreciation has two impacts. It's funded and unfunded depreciation. So it always happens in our accounts. So we'll still see this charge of 86,000 going through the actual accounts, but it doesn't impact rates because we'll just choose not to fund it. And again, this is something, that we could look at as part of LTP and look at the actual reserve and what we think we need to spend in the future. But the proposal is just to pause it for this year, and then we'll obviously review it in LTP.
Through the chair. Is that 458,000 sitting in the bank somewhere?
Yes.
So with all the other timing changes of the previous things, couldn't you just keep 120k of that and then not change any of the times for the services for the last 4 slides?
In theory, yes. So, but as I said, it's a ring fence reserve, so that's something that council will have to make a conscious decision to say it's going to release the reserve. So
Can the council break the ring fence?
it can, it's a council discretion to do it, but again, it's straying into an LTP that,
I'm just asking
yeah, no,
for
I mean that,
permission,
yeah.
So that colleagues know
Yeah,
where we're
it
sitting.
is something that, council sets the reserve, so it sets its own. There are some restricted reserves which council has no control over, but this is a council created reserve, so it is a council decision. So this money can only be used for that. Council does have the discretion to say, we want to use this money for something else now. So it could be.
Through the chair, my concern is if we do run out of fuel in 7 weeks, a lot of these places are going to be empty. What's our fallback position with employment? They're still going to come in and or try to come to work. Fuel.
I think we're all grappling with that, actually. It's hard to get a sense of direction. We've been very self-focused. I realise it's outside of the remit of this meeting, but because I know it'll be of interest, we have been keeping quite tight with the emergency management and defence so that we know what's going on with that. But it's challenging. It will be for anybody here who's got vehicles to get to work and do things. So we've got a plan that we're thinking of internally, but it's hard to tell without the direction coming from high as to where our restrictions will be. But I would expect, is just crystal clear. It's not going to be too far off before their instruction comes down. But we're all in the same, boat. Sorry. That wasn't a Debbie Downer question.
No, it's just, I'm thinking, you know, the money's there, some people come for art, so if you're cutting times on services and they're coming up from South Westland or Retira, they might struggle to get, you know, into their existing timetable to get these services, so.
Yeah,
we
we
can
have
up-
subsidisation of it. Usually there's a subsidisation is what we.
Yeah, at least for the next year to see, suck it and see, you know.
I think there's options, but it'll become more clear as we get, and there's no reason why the options, what the consultation process will go through, and before the plan is adopted, hopefully, we'll have a clearer direction of where we've got shortfalls, where we haven't, and we may need to make some changes that are part of that process that aren't part of what we're going into now. Sorry, Carol, you had your hand up?
Just following through on Councillor Kingsley's comment, recommendation, suggestion. What happens next year? It's only a temporary. I mean, the reserves will be disappeared.
I think it's a situation we're all acutely aware of and thinking about and we need to, and I think it's, like Barb said, she's all over that. I've got several friends' emails regarding that fuel, exact thing at the moment, the fuel on the coast. So I think as things progress and we get an insight into where we're going and timeframes on this, there will be times when we potentially have to call you in for an extraordinary meeting to look at, you know, we're going to have to adjust this or that. We don't know at the moment, so crystal ball, but it is something that's going to impact, has potential to impact us significantly. So there may be the need to get everybody in for a think tank or to advise of, look, we're going to have to pull back on this or that, or we've got an increase of this or that that we're going to have to manage. So, you know, it's a moving.
And we will
moving
try,
ball at the moment.
we will try and do those ahead of what goes out, so you folk are at least aware, if we're gonna have to make changes, I want you to know about it, so when people come to you, you go, oh, yeah, that's fine, that's the plan, but that is. Okay, is there anything more on the library reserve? We've got another couple of slides, and then we'll get to the next steps. Are you all content with that so far? Okay.
Just a quick one on the OC as well, that again, it's an LTP issue, but obviously there's the potential rate capping conversation, which obviously you know that if central government is proposing to limit rate increases to 4% going forward, then, and again, totally Councillor Mackenzie's point, council has a decision, but just bearing in mind that we draw reserves now, we don't have the ability in the future to top them up. It's at the moment we do, so it's not a money grab, but it's also just we need to be conscious of what potentially is coming.
And if I can, I'll follow up to Stephen, as the rates cap, we still do not know whether that's on core services or everything else outside of core services. So until we know that, we're a little bit left in the air as far as, but we're doing it the right way. We're looking at managing and bringing things down, which is great. But as far as that big picture of the rates cap, we don't know where that sits yet.
And we're creating efficiencies, you know, this is good long-term planning. If we can make all these services a bit more efficient, then that's a win.
I think it's that work in progress where we get that balance, so it's not a cut and slash, it's actually just a gradual work towards it. And I think the direction of bringing the rate relief down at least puts us in a position that we're cognizant of the fact it is a phased approach, even if it does happen. But the more we can do to give that rate relief now, if we can, without damaging any of the other consequences, is. So we're on Stephen to
Yes,
heritage.
the final one. Yep, so this is just on the Heritage Park, which is a bit of an anomaly in that, again, we depreciate buildings at a heritage park. So the council does own those buildings. They're an asset that is transferred to us. So it's a vested asset that the Heritage Park gives to us once they've done it. We therefore depreciate them and put money aside into reserves to then pay for their renewal. However, it's a bit of an anomaly because, as you're probably already aware, but the Heritage Park actually raises itself to repair and build new buildings. So council doesn't need to put the money aside because the Heritage Park will pay for that. So this one is basically saying we don't need to depreciate, fund the depreciation. Sorry, we'll continue to depreciate the asset, but we won't fund the depreciation because when the building needs renewing, the Heritage Park will pay for the renewal itself. So in the plan at the moment, there's $109,000 a year There's actually $39,000 sat in the depreciation reserve where this has happened in the previous year. That is the only amount. It wasn't as large as it is at the moment. It's just, that's the amount that's being set aside. So actually what we're proposing is that we do release that from the reserve because it shouldn't have been put into reserve in the first place, and that we don't fund depreciation going forward. So the combined amount is the 109 and the 39, which gives us a 0.53 reduction in rates.
So can I read from that, Stephen, you're leaning towards if we release that, then that can be used to cover what they're asking for at this time?
It wouldn't be going back to, it would just go into the general, as it would be used as an offset against rates. So it wouldn't go to the Heritage Park, it would just go, it would be a reduction in rates.
So they're seeking that financial contribution.
Yeah. So council could then choose to do that, and then that would then be rated. So it's almost, this money is not, it's ring fenced for the replacement of buildings. So if the Heritage Park requests additional funding for something else, and the kind of two aren't linked in a way, but yes, you could offset it. But they're not necessarily linked. I've understood the question, sorry.
Okay.
It's just released into.
Yes, yeah.
Right, around the table, any, Brian?
Oh, I think there's a lot of pioneering history up there, and I think those guys do a great job. A lot of that machinery sort of made Westland, so I think we owe it some, need to look at some.
This doesn't take away.
No, this is not money. The Heritage Park doesn't get any of this money. It's the council sets it aside, so this is not reducing what.
We still pay their
Council.
insurance and their rates.
Yes. It's
So we should
just,
support them.
it's just, what we're saying is, if the building, fell down tomorrow, council would draw on its reserves and it would rebuild it. But we're saying that's not the agreement. The agreement is the Heritage Park would then do a fundraise saying our building collapsed. And if council then chose to somehow contribute towards that, it could, but at the moment we're treating it as though it's an asset that we have to replace. That isn't the case, and the agreement with the Heritage Park is responsible for those buildings, so it would then, they still get a grant towards maintenance, and they still, as you said, they get rate relief and pay their electricity and we pay their insurance. So this is not taking anything away from them. It feels like we're double dipping, that they would fund the new building and we're also putting money aside for a new building.
So it's just another example of trying to be more efficient in terms of how we manage some of these financial operations rather than trying to take away from it. Because I agree with Brian, it was supported and people would be very supportive of that, that we're continuing. But if we can do things internally, it's not causing anyone to pay, then that's where we should be. Okay.
So
Stephen?
sorry, are you saying that the current reserve balance is only 39K?
Yes, there wasn't not money we put aside, so yeah, I know that because from our previous exploratory conversations, yeah, they would go back and look at it. It's something that's only just started happening, so yeah, it would have been nice to find a little nest egg and say, actually, let's release that. But
Oh, I was just looking at the current allowance, 109K.
But
Is what the balance is.
yeah, so it only started in this current year, and actually this is part of the issue we've got with why the depreciation is under. So instead of 109, it was actually only depreciated at 39. It should be 109. That's kind of what's caused this depreciation error that we're coming up against.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll keep you moving through to the next slide.
Okay, so this is just to show the impact of all of those changes. Hopefully it's large enough for everyone to read. So LTP said at 8.6% increase. Current position changes. So these are the changes that the team and I went through and we've managed to do. So we managed to make some reductions. Part of the reason that this obviously has been difficult is because of that depreciation error. So although some of it is unfunded, some of it was funded, so we had to try and absorb that, and but we've made savings in others, we've had to offset it. So we can get to 8.24% without any additional changes, and then each of the changes here. So you've got what it brings the rate down to and the movement, which basically gets us down to the 6.65 that I kind of advised at the start of this session. So they're all of the amounts. They're on the individual slides as well. Just to say, so the next steps, the proposal at the moment is that there would be an extraordinary council meeting on the 1st of April to adopt draft annual plan. Might like to discuss timing of that shortly, but there the public consultation document would go out on the 13th of April. For those of you not been through the process before, which includes me, public consultation document does have recommendations, so council will need to make a recommendation. So that it goes out, but there's always a, whether it's 1, 2 or 3, but council will say, this is council's recommended, and we'll give explanations. So council will need to make a decision either to include it in the consultation or remove it completely. And if it does go to consultation, what their recommendation is. We have here public hearings on the 13th and 14th May. That might reduce to just the 13th, depending on the responses we receive back. And then we would go for adoption of the annual plan at the council meeting on the 25th of June, which obviously would come into effect on the 1st of July, and rates will be struck a week after. Just a reminder again that, we are going to kick off long-term planning soon, so I know there's lots of people want to get stuck into. The first internal meeting is just to give you a bit of our internal processes on the 7th of April. So we have our first senior leadership team kick-off meeting on long-term plan, and we'll be coming to council very shortly after that to kind of start getting ideas and seeing what we're thinking. In terms of the timing, the only bit I need to kind of maybe look at and then need to come back to you is, so we need to now look at the amount of work that we need to do on options that you have given and what are the information you'd like to see. So obviously the first is next Wednesday. So the team needs time to then look at that. I suppose as well, as Barb said, it would be good to get a steer of, is there anything that we've listed out of the 7 options? We're not making a decision, but is there anything that everyone has I don't think anyone was saying no to any of it. I think everything was bringing it forward.
Unless I've read the room properly, I don't think anything's come off the table. Things that are on the table, there needs to be a little bit more tweaking around the edges, do a little bit more investigation about numbers and what that is. That fills in consultation process. The general principle, if we're on the right direction, we go away and bring that up, get the paper, and the metrics we need for that. And if anyone's had any, I don't know, we've exhausted looking at what we think we've got on the table, but if anyone had any, I guess, moments of epiphany overnight that they saw something that they thought, right, that might make a huge difference in this within the long annual plan constraints, now's probably the time to let us know. Otherwise, we'll work on what we've got here to frame it up for the consultation in the draft adoption. Stephen?
Just something I just need clarification on with the making sure the annual plan tracks the current LTP. We've been discussing this issue, but I'm just wondering if there needs to be some statement in the annual plan about the LTP's adopted position on Peke Waitara. Because currently we don't comply with the LTP on that as the intention of the LTP. It's quite clear that was to sell the building. So if we are putting that on hold, or we probably need to put some sort of statement in the annual plan to cover that.
Well, we talked it through the auditors when we got the long-term plan, and the minutes from that meeting were sound. I don't think there needs to be an amendment to it. I can have a look at it again, but the auditors were content with what it was. We're not altering the Peke Waitara building position as it is, and the minutes stand up to what the last training came up with. But I'm happy to have a look at it again, but the way that we spoke with the auditors last time, there wouldn't need to be any statement in this one. When we do the new long-term planning, that's the opportunity when we would raise any changes. That would be significant changes. We would do something different than what we stated in that original long-term.
It would be worth getting advice because it clearly says the building to be put on the market immediately.
Yeah.
And so that obviously hasn't been done, which is fine. We know why that is, but it needs to be covered in the annual plan.
I've got a meeting with
It
the
may be that we
auditors
put a
this
statement
week.
in just covering that off
Yeah.
to where we are
Well,
right.
let's the auditors have a look at it and see what their preferred position is, and then we'll come back to you. But if we need to, we can put it into the consultation process as well, so that it's all clear.
Because
It just eliminates uncertainty and that focus of questioning, doesn't it?
there might be some comments come back during this consultation process saying,
Why hasn't it been done?
why haven't we done anything about it?
Okay.
Right.
As
And-
opposed to focusing on what we're wanting them to focus on.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I can check. I've got a meeting. Great.
Um, I was just wondering, this might not be the right forum for, it, but, we've looked at ways to, save money. But, in regards to, revenue creation, I'd like to see, the Kamara campsites looked at with a view to charging people to park there. Because, I think at the moment, we can't do that because we have to be registered as a camping ground, but are other ways around that to
I think, Greg, what we'll do is that will come part of the long-term plan that we kick off in April, and we are looking at some other opportunities, get some revenue conversations happening both internally and externally. So that falls well into that remit, and there's no reason that couldn't be from this. Okay. Is there anything else? Otherwise, I'm happy to hand back to me.
Just
Oh,
one, sorry, I've just spoken to my colleagues very quickly, we're happy with the first vote. We can turn this around.
Just what I would say to council, especially the new ones regarding the next steps, is just put those dates into your diary, please, because public hearing one is where people come and speak to what they've written to us about. And it's the only time you'll get, it's not a long time, they speak to, you get the opportunity to ask some questions, but sometimes it's a valuable bit of time to really understand where that's coming from. So if you can, please earmark those dates, they are valuable because, and I think it's the same with what we go out to the wider community when we go out for consultation. We're going to have to get it out there to them because the returns on feedback is quite restrictive, but we need to get out to them that never has their feedback been sold to us. Bearing in mind the current economic situation we're in as well. So we really need to, as councillors, to be out there asking people to please get involved with this. But yeah, those dates are going to be really important for us as far as what we've got to face coming up.
These are in the calendar, these are the the annual plan hearing and deliberations.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and the all day, 9 to 4,
Yes.
both
Yes.
days.
Yes, I think, hopefully we get lots of response, but I think in the past, if the response has been low, then it's moved to just one
Yes,
day.
but I think it's up to us as councillors to get out there and talk to people as much as we can, asking them to partake in this, because we're going to be taking their direction. And you know, if they don't actually get involved, it makes it really hard when you're making those decisions. So, but I think as a council, we'll probably put some more promotional stuff out in the social media.
There's a whole
media as well,
process around
please. Just before we close off, I do need to add that Francois, Paul and Janella, obviously apologies, but they have all communicated with me at the early parts of the meeting on that one. So Sam has got those recorded now in the minutes of the meeting. Yeah, so, yeah, that's completes today. Thank you everybody for your participation. I think the conversation's been really good. It's thought provoking too on where we are, and it's actually understanding a little bit more about the services we do offer out there as well. So if there's nothing further with that, we will close off at 11:23 AM, and thank everybody for their time and good work, and thank you again to the staff, because I know you've got enough in the day-to-day without all this as well, so it is extra stuff that you're doing, and you know what the focus is of us, and we're very grateful to the work that you guys all contribute to this. Those thanks. And if you could please pass on the feedback from the community on the library, because it's just been outstanding feedback on the staff there. Just it's been exceptional, it really has.